quickly grab a coffee before we begin.
Please.
So, because it's
Coffee will help you.
Yeah, it's I have like a carton of these for nights such as this.
Great.
Dr. Gas, come, please. Welcome, Bangkok.
Hello.
Welcome, sir.
Hello, Professor Lunwal.
Hi. And hi, Mammo.
Mammo mute.
Long time no see. Nice to see you again. I hope this network is okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's morning, in El Salvador.
Hello, Andrew. Hello, Sean.
Hello. Yes, it is morning here. So that's why it goes in quotation marks, because it's so different every place else.
Yeah. Hello, Susan. Hi, Susan. Yeah. We have 2 minutes left. In another 2 minutes, we will start.
I can pause you here, replay. Sorry, folks.
Yeah. Nimita, I think Nimita, we can start. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So, hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to the Chris Freeman Centenary Lecture Series, Innovation System 101. Today, we'll be having our lecture number 8. As we could see, the lecture pertains to, why am I not able to? Yeah. So the topic of the lecture is Application of National Systems of Innovation. This would be chaired by Professor Mammo Muchie, and the speakers for today's lecture is Dr. Kenneth Fung and Dr. Gifty Appiah. I am Namita Pandey, the moderator of today's event. I once again welcome all of you joining us today and to be a part of this lecture. To talk a little about what this series is. This particular series is organized in the honor of Chris Freeman, who was the founding father of the modern innovation studies. It is fortunate that 2021 is his birth centenary year, and we are celebrating this year by this particular series. The particular series is organized by fellow alumni of the PhD Academies of GlobalX, which is the global network for the economics of learning, innovation, and competence building system. It was founded by Bendek Lunwal and his contemporaries, and many of us are a part of this network, and we look forward to enlarge this network in the future. The series is co-hosted by UN Merit Netherlands, and we go forward to this idea that what is the format and the structure of the series. We have 13 lectures in the series by 38 speakers coming from different stage or say of their careers, and a mix of eminent scholars, early career researchers, and people who are looking forward to build up the foundations of systems of innovations. This series is expanded for 3 months and by early career researchers in innovation systems, and it is further discussed by senior scholars and even early career researchers as to how we are shaping up the innovation system studies. The major objective of this lecture is to attract young talent into the innovation system domain, and it is also to embolden the early career researchers and the interdisciplinary use of the IS framework in their research. To go further, I would say that we have a team, as I mentioned, of 38 learners and doers and experts of innovation systems. I don't want to go onto the names. You can see a lovely collage which we have come across with this, and you can have a look at it. We have some great minds on our team and some to be great minds on the team. So I'll go forward with this, going to particularly who all are these people who will be talking today and chairing the event, though they're known and unknown faces. However, I'll begin with talking about Kenneth, so Kenneth is a lecturer at the Postgraduate Research Center at OWA University at Malaysia, and that is at KDU University College. He's a member of the University of Fung Global Network. He holds a PhD in Science Technology Study from University of Malaya, and he's a Master of Communication from the University of Queensland. Some of his research interests include scientometric innovation studies, STI policy and management, science communication, science technology, and society studies. Another speaker we have, Dr. Gifty, and she is a lecturer at I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's Wame Kurme University of Science and Technology. She's a coordinator of agribusiness program, KNUST, and she is also a part of the DNIDA, which is funded PhD in collaboration with 3 Danish universities. She's a member of Africalix, GlobalX, and the like groups and network, PhD visiting Sandwich Fellow at Denmark. Some of her interests, as she says, it's about agribusiness development, business innovation, agriculture, value chain, knowledge transfer, innovation systems, value addition and development of noble agricultural products. Last but not least, the chair of the session, Mammo Muchie. Professor Muchie is Professor Muchie is the DST NRF chair in the in innovation study at the Tshwane University of Technology. And he's also the fellow of South African Academy of Science, the African Academy of Science, and the African Science Institute. He is presently the adjunct professor at Africa Center for Science, Technology, and Innovation in Data Sciences at the University of Rwanda. He's also serving as the adjunct professor at RC University, Addis Ababa University, and the University of Gondar, Ethiopia. I'm sorry, the slides are moving. That's the best or the worst part of having a virtual meeting. But anyways, coming to the idea, he is a senior research associate at TMD Center for Oxford University, and he has been the student of Chris Freeman. So who could be better chairing today's session than Mammo Muchie? With this, we come to some of the basic, information that is there, and some housekeeping rules. That the entire meeting is being recorded for academic purpose. The Zoom platform is provided by the UN Merit, and with this, I would say the housekeeping rule is kindly keep your mics muted while the speakers are talking. And if you have any interventions to make, please use the raise hand signal. With this, I would hand over the virtual mic to Professor Muchie to give his initial remarks and thoughts before Kenneth and Gifty take over the floor. Over to you, Professor Muchie.
I hope my network will work. Sometimes it plays up. So, but it's thank you so much for this Chris Centenary effort, that the initiative you took. It's very, very exciting, and I really appreciate Rajesh and all the academy, PhD academics in Global-X, and it shows that Global-X really has done remarkable achievements by making sure that all the younger people from all over the world now are connecting. And it's so wonderful to see you from all parts of the world. You are there. And I appreciate genuinely that for BAL to have initiated this and try to bring the world intellectually to be united, rather than what we see in the world, which is, the divisions and so on. So I think the intellectual unity, the knowledge unity, the knowledge and imagination, hybridization is very good. And I think Global-X is a very good network, and it should continue, I think, very, very well. So Chris Freeman is, as you know, I was lucky to be supervised by him, but he was not just like a supervisor. For some reason, when he recognized I was just living alone in the UK, he behaved like a father. Trust me, honestly, and I will always remember him for what he did. So he's okay. Hello. Can you hear me? I think the network.
Yes, Professor Muchie, you're audible.
You
Please. Yes.
All I'm going to say is that I was very I read the PowerPoint of the students, these two lecturers, and what they are now saying is what is the application side of the innovation system. So they were very clear on what we should do about the application side. And the interesting questions have come. They say, what are the analytical focusing device we need to focus on? What are the policy tools that we need to implement and national system of innovation? What are the different application areas that national system of innovation has been done with? And are there any case studies to do? And from all this, what do we learn? And also different countries, how do they use them? The small countries, the low income countries, the developed countries, what is the variations? And so they are trying to focus on the application side. So at least I remember Richard Nelson said, he said that nations seem to be conscious as never before of their innovation systems and how they differ from those of their peers. And it's leading to attempts on the part of nations to adopt aspects of other systems that they see as lending strength. So what we're learning from what they are saying from the application side is not just the theory of national system of innovation, but from the application side, what can we draw? What can we learn? What can also different actors and different nations also learn from it, is what they are saying. So the important thing is the innovation systems, as Bal has always been saying, they have different elements, they have different components, they have different parts. They also perform different activities, they form different functions. The degree of effectiveness of the functions vary. The linkages also, the interconnections, the interactions also are not clearly in one or the other. They are weak, strong, and they vary. And all innovations also, the boundary setup is also, although we may have the national system of innovation, we have special categories, sectoral categories, technological categories. All of this can come also and affect it. So we have the whole system, the key system of innovation elements, from the conceptual frame, the governing ideas, the policy setting, the actors that engage in it, the specific unit of system generation. In other words, do we go for national, for sectoral, for regional, for community, for industry, yeah, for even our universities, governments, all of them, you see? How do we actually bring all of them in the, when we say national system innovation, it could be general. When we actually identify all the actors, then it can be very interesting. The activities, the institutions, the knowledge, the incentives, all these things matter very much. So the interesting question now is that how do we, when we start thinking about what the presenters are going to do, the analytical focusing device, the national policy to the application side, what are they going to do in terms of the innovation creation side, the absorption side, the transfer side, the adaptation side, the facilitation of outcomes, and the hindrances side. How do also what do we have when some activities we do, we get locked in, and sometimes they open. So how do we also facilitate system openness and system unlocking? All these things matter very much. And then, of course, we have very important issues that we need to think about. The innovation part, maybe different innovations exist in different areas, in the informal sector, in the formal sector, all this in the agriculture sector, in the industry sector, in the manufacture sector. How do we also come about to, is there a way we could also integrate? There are many things we need to integrate. The activity set, like which areas we need to do activity on, agriculture, industry, manufacture, and so on. And then now we have this digital sphere now, the virtual side is coming on us. It's affecting us, robotics, many things like that, blockchain, many of these things are emerging. And then loss of jobs, new jobs are created, all jobs are lost. A lot of challenges are being now declared that many young people might be in a situation, unless they are technologically kind of engaged, they may lose many jobs, and so many challenges may come. So we have very specific challenges that happens because the high tech, the medium tech, the low tech technology, what they generate, what they do also varies. They exclude and include people, and they create also. What is very interesting is I would like us to think like this. If the innovation system side now, because of the way the world is going, we now move from the physical world to the virtual world. from the robotic side, the job loss and creation side is changing. And then we are also moving into these challenges like we need to think of also inclusion in terms of social innovation of these various things I just mentioned to you. What we need, what I want like you to think is a new approach needs to be developed, a new rethinking, unthinking the old national system of innovation to rethink it in a holistic, integrative fashion, unified fashion. So we need to find some new approach where we also generate, we also think not just describing the existing reality as it is, but also an imagination. Be like all of us, you need to be organic intellectuals. Organic intellectuals have also vision, like they have also values. They also they don't just give data and information. They theorize, they conceptualize. They say we also want a new world which is peaceful, which has the security of hope, what Chris Freeman calls the economics of hope. And I think, and what he also used to say, uh, 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 Elson Wilson, who wrote on the unity of knowledge. Chris was also saying sociologists, politicians, economists must also work with natural scientists. So the social, the natural, and all these sciences have to also be integrated in some way. What it means is the innovation idea can be built in such a way that we imagine a reality about the world. Now look what's happening in all this, in the world we are in, the competitions nations make, the military industrial complex they make, all the security challenges, intelligence, all these things are negative. From these negative self-interested things, how do we also use innovation to go beyond it, globalize it in some way? And actually also in terms of the innovation output, it also has the challenge, the output, not just to make commercial profit, and market profit and economic gain and profit gain, but also social gain, environmental gain, health gain. All these other new things need to, but new validation criteria, all these have to be rethought. I think some new idea, new imagination, new hybrid imagination is in the innovation sphere is extremely necessary. And I hope the lecture that our presenters will, Kenneth and Gift will present, Dr. Kenneth and Dr. Gift, I hope they will also encourage us and stimulate us. And from them, you will also be motivated to have a wonderful discussion. I welcome you. Thank you very much. This is a very good initiative. I hope we could develop the CRIS to a great institute so that we can really motivate and really connect with each other, not just also virtually, hopefully physically in the not too distant future. Thank you very much. Welcome all of you, and lovely to see all of you, Bal and all of you. It's just wonderful that you are here. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Muchie, for setting the context for today's lecture. With this, I won't take much time, and I just invite Kenneth and Gifty to take over the day. Please, over to you, Kenneth and Gifty.
Thank you very much, Nimita. It's a great honor to be a part of this ensemble of speakers. I feel very grateful to Rajesh as well as the rest of the organizers for putting this great series of lectures together. I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Gifty Appiah. She will be presenting shortly. And we are currently here to talk about the applications of NSI. So let me just introduce myself a little bit further. I'm actually an alumni of the Global X Academy of 2015, as some of us are over here as well. And that was a very interesting experience for me, simply because I come more from a social studies of science and technology background. Nonetheless, National System of Innovation has been a big part of my PhD thesis. And this is something that has sort of stretched into my current studies as well, my current research as well. I'm currently affiliated with the KDU University College. We've just been acquired 2 years ago by the University of Wollongong from Australia. So interesting times. But essentially, we're in a period of transition. But enough about that. Today is actually an installment in a series of lectures that have to do with innovation systems research. So the initial lectures were essentially to do with the historical nature of innovation systems, how did it come about, and what were the antecedents before the innovation systems literature. Then we kind of moved into what are the central components of national systems of innovation, as well as the institutional aspects and different approaches to NSI, which has led to what we have today, which is talking about the applications of NSI. And then we will sort of move forward into what are some of the methods that have been actually utilized to actually study NSI and so forth. We will actually end our series of lectures with the big guns, large panel discussion of talking about development issues and the Global South together with the theory and the foundations in April. So today's lecture, it looks like a lot of sections, but it really isn't. We have 1 hour to complete all of our content. And we will start off with Gifty, basically talking about national systems of innovation as an analytical focusing device, as well as a national policy tool. And then I will come in and discuss what are some applications of NSI, case studies, and also some of the more peripheral elements of the literature to do with transitions and catching up, as well as some small country innovation systems. So without further ado, I am going to pass the time to Gifty. Gifty?
Hello?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you so much for this opportunity. In fact, it's such an honor to have been invited to give an exposition on this very important and interesting concept of innovation systems. I hope that at the end of the presentation, everybody here will be stimulated, and especially the early those who are pursuing early careers in innovation systems would have their interest whipped up to take up more opportunities of research in this particular field. So just sharing the slides. To begin, I would want to set the tone for today's lecture, which is the...
Gifty, can you go full screen? Can you go full screen?
Just a minute, please. Yeah, I think it's better now. Good. So as I was saying, to put this lecture in its right perspective, I would provide some background on the whole systems theory and where national systems of innovation is founded. Earlier lecture series have talked about innovation systems into great details, and they have backed all their arguments and discussions by relevant literature in that field. So to talk about the national innovation system as an analytical focused device, we would want to begin by understanding or trying to agree with the earlier lectures that talked about system theory as constituting of components that are related and work together to achieve a common objective. It has also been emphasized by Carlson and others in 2002 that the systems are made up of components, relationships, and attributes. So if we agree with that assertion, then in describing the innovation systems, we will say that it comprises a network of critical actors that interact in a given geographical or sectoral setting and apply knowledge and information that are available to them, either within or outside their setting, to produce innovations that would seek to address socioeconomic problems or needs in their specific context. So in doing so, there are also new ways of application and development that will emerge relative to the socioeconomic needs and aspirations. So the systemic approach is very, very valuable in industrial and developmental policies that are geared towards economic development. That is the main aim of it. And it would include all important factors spanning economic, social, political, organizational, institutional, and other factors that will influence the development, diffusion, and the use of innovation, as has been stressed by Edquist in 2005. Especially in an African context, it highlights the importance of continuous public and private policies and engagements and efforts that are aimed at promoting the capacity to acquire and use knowledge and also to innovate. So I think all of us would agree with Lundvall on his paper in 2009 that talked about innovation system as an open, evolving, and complex system that actually encompasses relationships within and between organizations, institutions, and socioeconomic structures, which will determine the direction of innovation and competence building. So this would debunk the earlier view of innovation and NSI as linear, but would rather be viewed as a systemic network, will be viewed from the systemic network perspective. The concept of innovation, as we may have gathered from the earlier lectures, can be applied at different levels. The level of analysis could begin from the micro through the meso to the macro perspectives. The micro being analysis at the firm's level, and then the macro being analysis at the policy level. So the policy will yield the macro perspective of this analysis. It has become a very, very useful framework for national mobilization for economic growth, both in rich and poor countries. When we talk about the innovation system, the national system of innovation is very much talked about, and it's become this popular because all developmental decisions by way of policy are taken at the national level. So the nation becomes the unit of analysis. So the national system of innovation of a country is therefore vital for enabling increased competitiveness through accelerated economic performance. So because the concept largely emanates from developed countries, it is very crucial for developing countries that also hope to catch up with the advanced industrialized economies. So we should, in doing this, not lose sight of the fact that the cultural features of the society need to be presented, and the innovation model originating in a developed country's context also needs a thorough scrutiny before its integration in developing countries. From the review of
Seems we lost Gifty. We'll wait for a minute or so and we see if she could resume, or I would request Kenneth to continue the lecture. Will that be okay with you, Kenneth?
Yeah, perhaps we just give her a minute to come back.
Sure, we'll do that. Rajesh, would you like to connect with her through the phone?
I'm trying. Let me see.
Okay. Thank you, Rajesh. It seems this is the new normal. Okay. Yeah, we all are used to these exigencies. Wish we could sing a song, but yeah, anyways.
She's back in the waiting room. So.
Okay, yes. Rajesh, could you just...
She has joined. She will continue.
Okay.
She will continue. She has
Go.
just joined. Just joined.
Welcome back, Gifty. You are mute. You're mute. Unmute yourself.
If she goes off, Kenneth can also join in. You can.
Yes.
You should follow. It's a presentation by both of you. So
Yeah.
support her.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hello,
that will be perfect.
sorry about that. There was a small hiccup there, technical hiccup. So sorry about that. So I'll go on and share the slides
please.
again from
Yes.
there.
Can you hear us? No? No.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, Mammo, we can hear Gifty and we can hear you as well. So yeah,
Yes.
we are all sorted to start off again.
Okay. Yes, so I'll pick up from where I left off. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, the review of literature made it evident that middle income countries consider the dependence on natural resources as a particular factor in the system's ability to innovate and execute its innovation policies. Good. So countries' research capacity, their infrastructural base, their propensity to innovate, their absorptive capacity, be it their financial capacity, their human, organizational and social capital, and learning capabilities also comes to bear in these kinds of analysis. So with the NSI as an analytical focusing device, from the diagram displayed, we can locate a core and we can locate a core and a wider setting around the core. So the core circle, or what you can see as an inner circle, would have some interactions with the wider setting around it. The core of the innovation system is thus the firms who interact with other firms and with the knowledge infrastructure. Within the inner core, the diagram illustrates that the NSI is an approach to developing technological capability through the process of knowledge generation, diffusion, and use. So the NSI concept argues that the firm is the central component of the system, and the firms innovate based on their interactions and linkages with other firms and knowledge institutions, including universities and other technological institutes. So the firms are the units that play the most important role in the innovation system, and their interactions directly affect organizational performance. Their style and mode of innovation and learning are also dependent on the national education systems, their labor markets, their financial markets, as you can see in the outer circle, and as well as their financial markets, intellectual property rights, competition in the product market, and the welfare regimes as well. So it's a whole network of interactions, both within and outside of the firm. Firms in different sectors differ in their approach to innovation based on the factors that I have already mentioned, but it is worth emphasizing again that it is mainly an analysis of knowledge generation or production, transfer or diffusion, and its use. The approaches to learning or in diffusion are mainly through two different but complementary modes of innovation. The first one being the STI, and the second one being the DUI. But we have seen a lot of bias in literature towards the concepts of STI policy, as it requires higher technology and higher science, often used in developed countries. Some of the flagship STI programs we have heard about include innovation hubs, incubators, industrial parks, ICT parks, and the rest. So firms, particularly in developing countries, do not prioritize innovation as it does not affect more urgent income need. And as such, the analysis of the NSI has a tendency to focus on macro aspects and the periphery of innovation systems rather than the micro. This has been argued in literature as one of the weaknesses of the system, thus it loses touch with how actors interact and how relationships are built at the micro level. I'm sure that is where the triple helix concept found its strength and was emphasized by Lecture-08 and Ladysdorff in 2000 as having the strength that describes these interactions. So innovation starts with small activities in few countries to a global movement. So it's not surprising now that we are hearing a lot of global value chains and their relation with national systems of innovation. So once this is done, definitely the next step is to view national systems of innovation as a policy tool. Once we have been able to establish the connections, the strength, and the linkages, then we would have to, based on some of the weaknesses, come up with policies that will help strengthen these weaknesses for economic development. Next slide, please. Good. So as a national policy tool, the concept has been used by policymakers in many countries, including the biggest economies in the world we can think about. Talk about Japan, United States of America, Russia, South Africa, China, and India. But also it's been applied to other small countries because it serves as a framework for policy coordination, which is needed in the learning economy for economic growth. Again, some international organizations for economic cooperation, such as OECD, World Bank, EU Commission, have also adapted the concepts. So from the innovation system perspective, it points to which institutions need to be strengthened to ensure greater innovation. So it can lead to policy issues on education, policy issues on science and technology, policy issues on intellectual properties, policy issues on regional and municipal policy, and also industrial and foreign policy. The innovation, national system of innovation can be applied at different levels of the analysis. This is where I would say that this lecture is a direct sequel to what we experienced last week, which talked about the different dimensions of innovation. In that lecture, it came to light that there are different points of departure when it comes to the analysis. So we can talk about the territorial point of departure, which is basically the geographical space that talks about the national systems of innovation proper, which has been discussed into greater detail in literature by Lundvall, Nelson, Edquist, and other scholars alike. Also, we can talk about the regional innovation systems that has also been propounded by Cook, Maskell and Malmberg in 1997. Again, departure is the technological systems of innovation by scholars such as Jacobson, Carlson, and Stankiewicz in 1993. Last week's lecture, sectoral systems of innovation was widely discussed, and it has also been discussed by Maleba and Bresci in 1997. It is interesting to note that you can combine all of these levels of analysis too, because if you should take a national systems of innovation, maybe there are some peculiar technologies you may want to focus on, or there may be some peculiar sectors you may also want to consider in your overall analysis. So, talking about the sectoral system of innovation, I think a suggestion came last week that we should focus on an innovation that will be relevant in a developing country's context. And so belonging to or having a background in agriculture and being one of those who are interested in coming up with innovation that would enhance the performance of the agricultural sector, agricultural innovation system came in handy. And also people raised the concern that sometimes we lose out on the specificity of some of these aspects of agriculture that we can focus on. So I chose the Ghana cocoa value chain as a specific example to expose the concepts of agricultural innovation systems in Ghana. As far as Ghana is concerned, cocoa is a pillar in national development planning. So it's very important to assume the systemic perspective for analysis of developmental issues in relation to the cocoa industry from the innovation systems perspective. It's one of our major crops. I'm sure a lot of people who have read about Africa in Ghana know about this already. In addition to contributing about 25% to annual total foreign exchange earnings, it's also a source of livelihood for many rural farmers and related actors in the value chain, providing employment for a fairly wide range of both skilled and unskilled labor. It is considered the most important economic crop for the country and very instrumental in lowering the poverty rate in the country as well. So if we are interested in making cocoa maintain its enviable position at the top of all agricultural commodities, then it's important to analyze the drivers and change innovation that is required. So this example describes the cocoa innovation system, and it presents an analytical framework for discussing the trends and innovations in the industry that would inform policy. So looking at this diagram, the theme as the focus has been highlighted as the cocoa industry, and we are seeing its interaction with a lot of other institutions, and we can see that the Cocoa Board is the institution that has been instituted by the government to have to oversee all activities of the cocoa industry. And under this Cocoa Board, we have different subsidiaries that are also responsible for different functions. So directly, we see the cocoa industry interacting with some global companies, some processing industries, some civil organizations. It's also looking at some scientific institutions, specifically the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana, and then the monitoring and evaluation institutions as well. And we also have the marketing and the commercial enterprises. Good. So, beneath and above this interaction, we see that we have some internal national factors that also have an influence on the activities of this industry. So if you can cast your mind back to the first illustration I made, you would realize that the outer circle is how the firm interacts with the factors around it. And with this, we can say the national development agenda comes to play. The economic policy of the nation within which the industry is situated also comes to play. Agricultural policy, that's if we are talking about agricultural innovation systems, the programs and strategies, investment policy and its related legislations and regulations. Also, external factors such as other multilateral and bilateral agreements, global companies, international cocoa trade regimes, regional and other sub-regional conventions would also have an influence on the activities and the subsequent performance of this industry. So it is important to discuss more summarily the roles and activities of these critical factors. Once we have been able to identify the components within this agricultural innovation system, it's prudent that we look at who is responsible for what in plain terms. So in reflecting on the cocoa innovation system, the effectiveness of the functions or roles of the critical actors and the application of new knowledge will determine the extent to which set goals and objectives of the cocoa industry are achieved. So let's look at some of these functions. When you take the Ghana Cocoa Board, as I have already indicated, it implements government policies and programs on cocoa and selected cash crops. And when you talk about financial institutions, in this case, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, we can say that it oversees Ghana's economic policies and programs, national budget, and resource allocation. The license buying companies, they are mandated to buy cocoa and sell to statutory bodies. So it's responsible for internal marketing of cocoa. And then we have the cocoa processing companies who are responsible for processing of cocoa. The cocoa farmers, of course, we cannot but talk about them because they are the primary producers of the cocoa and they are involved in pre-harvest and industrial processing of the cocoa. We have some international buyers or global companies that create the demand for this cocoa beans that Ghanaians hold in very high esteem. And there are some civil society organizations that are responsible for promoting rights and corporate responsibilities as well. The Research Institute of Ghana is also responsible for conducting research and development in cocoa and training farmers on how to take up some of these innovations in order to enhance their performance. So the performance boils down to the extent of innovation in the cocoa industry and how effective and responsive the critical factors are in the innovation system and how they are also responsive to policy stimuli in the internal and the external environment. I must emphasize that innovation is not just focused on high value added products. It also talks about how manufacturing capacities and institutions are diversified. So having done this, then we would be interested in looking at some of the policy outcomes from this analysis. And for the cocoa value chain, we realize that there are technological developments that continue to justify research and development and innovation in Ghana and other producer countries. It came to light that there are the development of cocoa butter equivalent from other sources other than cocoa. So in plain terms, we could say that they were competing with cocoa in terms of competitiveness. Therefore, the cocoa innovation system analysis, one of the institutional innovation system was the promotion of the farmers' participation in the production of organic and fair trade cocoa for the export market that would attract higher premium. So then it would be able to maintain its envious position as being the most important crop in Ghana. And some of the organizations that were responsible in making this happen included the public buying companies, produce buying companies, the Piapa Cocoa, and other license buying companies. Again, in the analysis, it became evident that the linkage with scientific institutions are not that strong. Therefore, the weakness, which does not facilitate innovation in the sector in any way. So policies were made at the national level to attract the needed capital to commercialize research, innovation, and innovations produced by institutions such as the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana. The policy is intended to feed into the National Agricultural Innovation System policy. Maleba made the points last week that if we are interested in knowing the specifics of a particular sector, we shouldn't lose fact of the bigger picture. So the bigger picture, maybe national systems of innovation, we are focusing on agricultural, the sectoral system of innovation, we are focusing on agricultural innovation system in cocoa. So we should be asking ourselves, or whatever we are able to come up with, should be able to feed the national policy by way of agricultural innovation system. Again, the marketing of cocoa was done mainly by PBC, that's the produce buying companies, and it was not very useful in driving competitiveness. So an institutional innovation which was supposed to re-energize the cocoa industry was the introduction of other license buying companies. And the introduction of these companies introduced competitiveness in the system, because those who were enjoying monopoly were becoming a bit complacent, and there was no drive to ensure that cocoa is always seen at the top. Again, other organizations such as the International Cocoa Organization is a very powerful organization that brings the international players together, and they are mainly to act and decide on how the global cocoa market should be structured for the mutual benefit of all. So in this regard, the cocoa consumer countries of the Western world would have a role to play to ensure the balance of power in the organization. There were some companies like Cadbury, Mars, Unilever, and several other companies whose food industry depends on raw materials such as cocoa. Sometimes people argue that the actions of these transnational companies are mainly in their organizational interest. But can we begrudge them that much? Because it also gives an incentive for farmers to produce high quality cocoa beans, beans that will be able to bring us the premium that we expect. So having said that, these are some of the specific policies that came out from the analysis of the cocoa industry, the interactions that went on within the cocoa industry, and how policies can be made at the micro level all through to the macro level to ensure that we are able to enjoy some developments or see some improvements in the performance of the industry. So having used this to illustrate on NSI as an analytical focusing tool and as a policy tool, I would ask my colleague to also give some perspectives about this same application of NSI in other contexts other than the African context to add up to the discourse. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you very much, Gifty. I will proceed with the remainder of the lecture. So Gifty basically gave us the bridge or the connection between the theoretical foundation as well as the content of today's lecture with regards to applications of NSI. This is supposed to be the fun lecture, meaning to say that it will be a little bit less stuffy, and we will be focusing more on real-world applications in industry as well as policy. This also gives us an opportunity to discuss about what we are actually observing in the world today, and also the success stories that we've seen in national systems of innovation. So I would actually like to get started by just basically saying, just to echo what we've discussed earlier, we have seen NSI basically act as an inspiration for application in a variety of ways, in industry, in policy, in the way we are shaping our education system to focus more on producing more STEM-related human capital, which is something of interest to myself, mainly because I am more of an I sort of bridge between STS and innovation systems. In that sense, there's a growing need for us to actually, in a way, increase the number of engineers, increase the number of scientists and technologists, because we feel that technological capability acts as a driver that would actually ultimately spur the innovation systems forward. The most common way for us to see application of NSI is in research policy. So incidentally, one of our most celebrated journals is titled Research Policy. And research is something that we feel, is the accumulation of new knowledge and basically the transformation of that knowledge into application, which ultimately we feel would lead to more products or more processes, which is, in essence, is a very linear approach to innovation, which has sort of been debunked through the National Innovation Systems literature. Nonetheless, we still see evidence of how a lot of countries are sort of working on the assumptions of the linear model of innovation. And that is something that we feel is going to change, but then we are still, in a sense, living in the past in some cases. Nonetheless, we also see some policies which are more vertical, which are more sector specific, as well as some policies that are focused in particular states, in cities and parks. I am sitting in a room in Malaysia. Okay, Malaysia is an interesting country when it comes to national systems of innovation, because we have a lot of plans. We have a lot of roadmaps, we have a lot of strategies, we have a lot of blueprints, and we have plans at every level. But the question is really about application, really about execution. How are we able to turn these policies into fruition? And that is a key question that we want to discuss today. So let's just move forward from this slide. So some notable patterns that we are going to discuss with regards to the application of NSI. I am very aware of the time limit, so I'm trying to be as brief as possible. Understanding that showing case studies of NSI can be a little bit daunting compared in a 1-hour lecture. So the first thing I want to discuss is really the establishment of government agencies to stimulate ecosystem. And that is something that we have observed in Gifty's case study with regards to the cocoa industry in Ghana. And that's something I will expand in more detail. The second one I want to discuss is about how does countries actually support new startup firms through financing, mentorship, and infrastructure. Okay, and then finally, I want to discuss about the concept of picking winners, where countries actually focus on specific sectors which we consider to be key growth areas. And in a way, we strengthen state-owned enterprises in order to sort of develop such winners in the future. So the first question, the first point I want to talk about is really about government agencies, and which is an interesting thing, because when we talk about national systems of innovation, in some cases it's considered to be more of a bottom-up approach, meaning to say that we can actually notice, how there are firms within a nation that have sort of organized themselves, or they have organized themselves into guilds or associations, and then they ultimately, sort of build from there. In some other parts of the world, government actually plays a much larger role in actually developing this innovation ecosystem. And in some cases, they would set up an agency in order to sort of, to bring that into fruition. So what we've noticed is that particularly we have seen government agencies such as ITRI in Taiwan, as well as other research institutions such as CSIRO in Australia and ETRI in Korea, as well as AIST in Japan. And these are just a handful of government, such government agencies. A lot of times they have a direct mandate from federal governments in order to spur innovation and play a role in supporting firms, particularly SMEs, in product development as well as problem solving. So there are similar such agencies in various countries. In Malaysia, we have an agency known as MIMOS that plays a role in developing new ICT applications. And so they play a dual role. On the one hand, they're actually facilitating SME growth. On the other hand, they're actually participating in mission-oriented research. So in a sense, they are sort of, driving the moonshot projects that a country would have, that they feel would actually sort of spur them or sort of bring them into, I like to say 21st century, but we're already 20 years into the 21st century, but sort of move them into the next phase. Okay, nowadays we're talking about 2030 or 2050. So these government agencies, they would actually work together with SMEs to develop products. They would actually have a broader role in industrial upgrading and furthering national interests. And they would also collaborate with universities and firms as they also have access to government block funding. I just want to point out a little bit more about ITRI in this case. ITRI is sort of like a public research institute in Taiwan. They have a sort of like a twofold mandate. On the one hand, they help SMEs. On the other hand, they do their own research. So they do provide solutions to SMEs, and then at the same time, they do develop their own technology, and they try to bring that into market by themselves. They have a pretty solid incubator program. And the interesting thing about this incubator program is that they are very harsh on their new SMEs, and to the point whereby they would be very happy to, to get you to declare bankruptcy if, let's say, you're not doing so well. In some cases, they feel that failure is probably a better teacher than success. A lot of their entrepreneurs actually have 3 or 4 startups that have failed in the past, and they feel that that is one of the learning outcomes of being an entrepreneur. If you're not failing, you're probably not doing it right. So in that sense, they have actually implemented a number of through doing innovation over the last many decades. They have learned different things that are more tacit to the way they do things, and in a sense, Malaysia sends a group of people to go and learn from Taiwan almost on a yearly basis. But to some degree, we don't always implement everything that we learn. So that's about government agencies, and in a sense, this has been covered in more detail by a paper by Professor Patarapong and Goto in 2018 in Research Policy, where they talk about the role that such public research institutes have in the national innovation system. Another thing I'd like to talk about is about financing and mentorship. This has actually been done in more detail by Olga when she was talking about institutions. But public financing of innovation is something that we observe is a pretty big aspect of the application of national systems of innovation. We feel that in order to develop firm capability, also to develop firms in general, they need to be given support in financing, as well as in capability building and mentorship. So a number of countries have actually implemented accelerator programs. They have set up incubators for new startups. They have set up policies that actually allow for university developed innovations to be transferred into the market, or for the commercialization of university-based innovations. into startups. Okay, and in a sense, this kind of public financing of innovation has sort of led to a number of very innovative companies being set up, as well as a way for the government to indirectly influence radical innovation. We have a pretty interesting project in Malaysia, which is an incubator called Futurize, which actually focuses on more groundbreaking technology such as flying cars and drone technology and things like that, which is interesting. The only flying car that I've seen so far is a little prototype, which is about the size of a Hot Wheels car. But there are varying degrees of financing and risk taking depending on the source. Nonetheless, various initiatives have provided access to seed funding, angel investment, and venture capital. One interesting case that I've noticed from our neighbor in Singapore is where we have noticed that there are SMEs that have been set up in Singapore, but have ultimately moved into advanced countries, which is not a very new thing. There is a company known as PatSnap, which was, I believe, a spin-off company from the National University of Singapore. They deal in patent analytics as well as patent searching, which is not very uncommon to us innovation scholars. Just a few years ago, what they've done is actually move all their operations as well as their leadership team from Singapore to the UK. So in that sense, you've noticed that all of their staff have actually turned into British people from Singaporean people or Asian people, which is not new. Okay, we have noticed previously, like firms have actually flocked to Silicon Valley because they want to be part of the innovation system there. Okay, which is interesting because when you have a successful firm that has sort of gone through the entire process of innovation, you'd think that they'd be sticking around to actually assist with the nation building, but then because they are profit-making organizations, they may take a turn elsewhere. Okay, so in that sense, I used to work for a company which was a Norwegian company that have actually moved out of Norway into Silicon Valley, simply because they felt that they wanted to be part of the culture, they wanted to have access to the human capital, they wanted to have access to the venture capitalists as well as the angel investors there. So there's an interesting project here that's kind of waiting to happen when it comes to talking about the migration of firms and the way that they have actually decided on how to turn into multinational companies and where do they place their R&D, which I feel is something that can be discussed in more detail when we talk about future research. Another point I'd like to bring up is about infrastructure. So a lot of countries actually have set up dedicated research areas or dedicated innovation zones for the sort of like the proliferation of innovation systems. Typically, they would be considered to be science parks in a sense, but usually they would be set up so that we have a place for incubation, we have a place for research, and in this place, the people are supposed to be able to interact together and be happy and ride bicycles and ultimately come up with new innovations as they go along. A lot of times, these science parks are heavily driven by the human capital that are there. But then, sometimes in some cases, they can be a little bit artificially grown. So in some science parks, they are actually a hotbed for multinational companies to set up their R&D. Okay, so for example, in Singapore, they are very keen to bring in foreign companies to set up R&D in Singapore. And they do that by introducing financial incentives, fiscal incentives, tax incentives. And they say, you can come and live in Singapore, you pay, 80% less tax compared to where you used to live. And you have access to some of the best human capital in Asia. Which sounds very rosy, but then a lot of times we notice that such science parks may not necessarily lead to the knowledge spillover that you're looking for, simply because a lot of times, in order to attract these people to come and to set up in your country, you would actually need to have a very strong IP regulation or IP, IP regulation. And in the process of setting up such an IP regulation, you're sort of blocking yourself from being able to, in a way, exploit windows of opportunity. If you have a very rigid IP regulation, you may end up actually, stifling your own innovation in that sense, because a lot of these engineers will feel that, whatever I'm doing, I'm doing it for my company. I'm not going to set up my own. Okay. Especially in a culture that's a little bit more conservative, as we do in Asia, some parts of Asia anyway. We are actually more keen to actually, work a little bit more longer for foreign companies than we do to setting up our own business. In some other countries, they do actually run it a little bit better. Hsinchu Science Park is a bit of a good case study, talking about the development of new SMEs, setting up new products as well as processes. So, and then we have other science parks as well. But then we feel that, MNCs are probably getting a little bit more smarter as well in how they place their R&D. In Technology Park Malaysia, what we notice is that there is a lot of R&D there, but the thing is that they also set up mainly call centers, as well as lower R&D activities situated in such countries. So last characteristic that I want to get into is about the sectoral focus. And we observe that many countries will center their innovation policies on what they perceive to be their own comparative advantages. A lot of the papers that we read with regards to national innovation systems in different countries would talk about their investment in R&D, as well as the sectors that they feel would be their best bet in order to sort of grow innovation, okay? Which I feel is logical in a sense. Like in Malaysia, we are still very much natural resource driven. We still have a lot of palm oil. So a lot of our focus is about building the industry that surrounds palm oil, as well as the different applications for palm oil products. However, what stifles this is that what we notice here is that there is not a lot of room for radical innovation in other sectors. So just focusing on key sectors may not necessarily have the impact that you're looking for. The state would in some cases also would also look to consolidate the resources into funding of state-owned enterprises, okay? Which is not too dissimilar to the Korean strategy of supporting their chaebols. If you're familiar with the literature surrounding the Korean experience, I believe that it was sometime in the mid-century of the 20th century where they were actually setting up all of these large companies, which will ultimately lead the technological catch-up that we see today. Your Samsung, your LG, so on and so forth. And a lot of these enterprises may not necessarily be state-owned, but they're very much state-supported. Okay. In a lot of developing countries, we see that there are a number of state-owned enterprises that play a much more larger role in R&D. There is a paper that was written by Tenoris and Caro, which talks about such state-owned enterprises. In Malaysia, there's Petronas, there is Tenaga, which owns most of our energy production, as well as there is Telecom, which owns most of our telecommunications. And in such state-owned enterprises, they play an interesting role because on the one hand, they're looking to make profit. On the other hand, they're trying to, push the state's agenda, okay, with regards to import substitution, export growth. An interesting case in Malaysia, which is not really a success story, is that we have a car manufacturer known as Proton, which some of you might be familiar with. Proton was set up in the 80s, and we were trying to actually develop a national car. We started off by doing very similar things to what the East Asian countries would do. We decided to start by rebadging, or rather essentially copying what was being done by other people. So we were actually taking Mitsubishi cars and we were putting another badge on it. That was the beginning. And that kind of continued until I think the 2000s or the late 90s, where Proton actually purchased Lotus. So that's a car manufacturer in the UK. and they went about, the intention was to actually integrate the technology into proton cars. That led to one particular model, which is known as the Gen 2, but after that, it all went quiet. So the sad story actually ended up a few years ago where Proton was eventually bought over by Geely, which is a Chinese car manufacturer. So Proton in that sense kind of went through sort of like a downward spiral, and it's supposed to be like the pride of the nation. It was our first car manufacturer, but in the sense, it did not actually achieve the lofty ambitions that we were intending to. But that is just one particular story from Malaysia. I would be happy to share more stories if we were ever in the same room together. But yeah, so it's interesting to talk about case studies in innovation systems because it's such a variety of case studies that we actually notice. This is a very interesting graph by Fagerberg and Strolek, which discusses the various countries and sort of like where they sit on the scale of innovation. And we noticed that there is a very large discrepancy between what we see in advanced countries, in sort of middle income countries, as well as the lower income countries, as well as depending on the size of the market as well. But what I intend to do here is basically just go through some of the few that that I'm familiar with, and I don't have a lot of time left. But I've spoken quite a bit about Malaysia. We do have a number of policies that have to do with innovation. We have a number of agencies, and then we have also like a number of incentives. So my own personal story is that in 2000 I heard that we wanted to do biotech, so I went and signed up for a degree in biotechnology along with many others. In order to work in what we wanted to work in as the Bio Valley, which is the Silicon Valley equivalent of biotechnology in Malaysia, which never happened. So eventually I ended up working for the National Biotech Corporation, which actually was spearheading our biotech policy in order to develop the local industry. And the strategies that we put in place were okay, but then we haven't seen the growth of a new multinational company from Malaysia, which was always the intention. There are other papers that go into South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, and BRICS, which are pretty interesting for you guys to read, but then that's something that we can do outside of this lecture. But one thing I want to talk about is that with regards to transitions, it is a very popular thing to talk about in East Asia and Southeast Asia, where we talk about catching up. And that has been, in a sense, observed in various case studies coming out of South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and China, particularly put forward by Professor Kyun Lee, as well as, and we see such case studies which draw a lot of parallels with the DUI mode of learning, especially in the concept of the firm's ability to leapfrog other market leaders and to go from copying to all the way to actually innovating new products and ultimately eating up the market share that the market leaders would have sort of left behind. There is also a very nice book which is written about small country innovation systems and which focuses on sort of like small economies that have had very interesting experiences with innovation. I spoke a lot about Taiwan, and a little bit about Singapore, but then I'd like to make some mention about Hong Kong as well, which I've done quite a little bit of research in and some field work. Hong Kong has always been an interesting case study because of where it sits. In the 90s, it was considered one of the last bastions of British colonization in East Asia. And then after that, it sort of transitioned into like this special economic administrative region for China. It was always considered to be sort of like the gateway into China for a lot of companies. So it attracted a lot of FDI. It attracted a lot of human capital. It attracted a lot of interest in their institutions, particularly the financial ones, which is why it's still considered one of the hotbeds for investment financing in the region. But Hong Kong in itself, has an innovation system which isn't very big, But because of the amount of science they do in the universities that they have, they've actually developed a number of research platforms which make them some of the foremost sort of authorities in their area. And they have also actually had a lot of success bringing in Chinese researchers or people who have connections to the Chinese innovation system. And they have sort of played a role in sort of developing links between the mainland China and Hong Kong. So there is this concept that, you know, when you buy a product, you don't really want to see the word made in China. No offense to those of you who are joining us from the People's Republic of China, but there have been papers that have been talking about how Hong Kong has made a name for itself by branding itself as made by Hong Kong, when their manufacturing is really in, you know, Guangdong, which is the southern part of China. Which is an interesting case because of the symbiotic relationship that Hong Kong has with southern China, that, you know, they can actually act as sort of like the figurehead of their companies, even though the majority of their manufacturing and the majority of their operations actually happens in China. So in that sense, Hong Kong has an interesting sort of position where they actually sort of leverage on their conduit nature between East and West. You know, they speak English very fluently there. They work very well with China, and they also do their own research. They also have their own innovation. But then, in that sense, you know, it's a very interesting sort of melting pot when you actually go there. So yeah, I have reached the end of my lecture. I'd like to end with some considerations. Our dear chair, Professor Mammo, actually made a parting comment in the past lecture, which asked the question, is it possible for us to have a unified theory of innovation? Which is an interesting point. As a person who comes from a social studies of STS, social studies of science and tech, I don't really find it very commensurable when you talk about how innovation studies can have a unified theory, simply because it's generally historical by nature. In that sense, it is considered to be reason history, as how Lundvall has put it in 2004. And we tend to try to infer underlying factors, but because it's so case study based, you know, it's very difficult for us to predict generalizable outcomes in that sense. You know, we feel that, you know, can a success story really be adapted by other people? In the case of Malaysia, we have tried to look east and we have tried to adapt it as much as we can, but then our success has been fairly limited. And then the next question is, does a country's comparative advantage really grant it leverage? Because if we try to keep doing the same thing over and over again, you know, does it really transition us from one state of development to another? Which is an interesting point, but I believe I've said as much as I can say. I thank everybody for the opportunity to participate in this. And Nimita, I believe that I'm done with my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth, for making this wonderful elaborative presentation, which not just talks about the conventional theories, but also brings in the contemporary tensions and challenges wherein we all are a little unsettled as to how to reinvent the wheels, so to say. But without further, I think we are close to the timeline, and without talking a lot about it, I would hand over the mic to Professor Mammo for his quick comments on the lecture. Over to you, Professor Mammo.
Thank you so much. This is a very, very good lecture. You gave a lecture on the practical side, the application side of the national system of innovation. And then you took very specific cases and addressed them quite well. I like the way you bring in Africa and then you bring in the tiger economies and also even the social democratic countries in Scandinavia. So I was just wondering, when you say, Charles Edquist co-edited this book, when you say the countries that grow faster and then the countries that grow slowly. What I notice in Scandinavia is that even though they may be slow, they have a social democratic kind of system. I was just wondering, and what are the faster growths in terms of the social side and the economic side and the rate of growth side, yeah, and the rate of the well-being, security of the people side. Exactly how are these measured in terms of does the faster growth indicate that also the quality of the well-being of the people is also developing faster? How could we integrate these two? I like you to think like that. The other one is especially on Ghana, Ghana, Ivory Coast, all of them, Cameroon, they produce the largest cocoa, but they don't produce chocolate. So in their value chain, the chocolate brand is in Switzerland, and others are Swiss chocolate is what you see. You don't hear about Ghana's chocolate or anything like that. But how is it that you develop from the natural, raw material cocoa to also value added chocolate? How could you do something like that? I wonder if you could reflect on these things also. I think the other important question is when we think of the national system of innovation, I understand by saying that the history part, in terms of if you talk about the Japanese innovation system in Japan, or if you say the innovation system in any specific country, you may focus it. You can also focus it on the region, on the sector, on the technology, on every aspect. You could do it, and you can have a kind of a long-term debate on it, or reflections on it. But I just wonder whether, given the way the world is going now, whether there's any chance that we also need to also integrate the back, the front, and the future. Is there any way we could also do these things? I like you to reflect on this very much. Is there any way we can actually still do the reflections and also the historical part, but at the same time, is there some way by which we could integrate the innovation system, the unifying, the holistic side, and the integration of the social innovation system type thing? And some integration, I think, is very useful now, given where the world is. I just like you to think about this, and very much. Okay, thanks a lot. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mammo. And I request Kenneth or Gifty if they want to maybe quickly respond to Mammo right away.
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond about the social element. I think that's a very interesting point. Nowadays, there's a growing interest in the concept of responsible innovation, and I think that is something which is sort of coming into the fore as well in East Asia. A lot of the previous literature that we talked about national innovation systems in East Asia really do focus on the hard economics rather than into the social aspect. And I feel that in a way, if I can speak bluntly, I think that we are very concerned about the economic side more than the social side in this part of the world. To that sense, but then nowadays, with the way the society is growing and the way we are changing, the social element as well as the welfare element is becoming more and more apparent, and I believe that we will see a lot more in the literature as we go about how do all these dimensions actually interact with the economic growth So that would be my comment on that. It's Gifty. You want to talk about the African side?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. Mammo, for your comment on let me say prestigious cocoa industry. It's true when you raise a concern that we are not processing as we are supposed to be. We process, but on a very small scale compared to the volumes of cocoa beans we churn out every year. And this is because the institutions within our processing firms are not as strong as they may be required. And talking of innovation, yielding the utmost results we are expecting, I think now the policymakers within the cocoa industry are looking at how best they can maximize their returns. And I think that is why they are fixated on producing premium cocoa beans that will attract premium prices. But if we are interested in letting people be engaged in activities that will also improve their livelihoods, then cocoa processing is something we should be talking about or having a discussion about. So now that the interactions amongst actors has yielded the very weak linkage between the processing industries and maybe the product development side, we would, as a national agenda, have to look at areas we can proffer policy interventions that will also help to address these. It doesn't hurt if we can win at both sides, because if we export all the cocoa and people are left within the country with nothing to do, then I'm not sure we have actually done justice to the inhabitants of our nation. So it's good, it's been raised, and I hope the policy makers are listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Gifty, and thank you, Kenneth, for making these quick remarks. And I believe there are a lot of curiosity and questions regarding the Ghana's case study, which will come later at some point in the discussion. But along with, I would start with some of the early career researchers who have posed few questions. Like, I would like to invite Rendani, who could make his interventions. Over to you, Rendani.
Right, thank you very much for the great presentation, Kenneth and Gifty. So I posted 2 questions earlier on, and I would like to post them now in a summarized version as Rajesh put forward. The first one is on the aspect of policy coherence. We have policies in different departments and ministries. And the question is, what are some of the lessons learned on how we ensure that there is coherence in the different policies? Because ultimately, we want to drive a unified agenda that takes the country forward. And then the next one is in terms of the agencies, which Kenneth touched on. We have our agencies within the different departments as well. And the question is, what are some of the best cases, or where there's been a success? How are the agencies actually set up? And if they are at a national level or at a lower level, how do we then ensure that there is also coherence from that perspective, even at an agency level? Because it doesn't seem to be working out as it should on our side. I'm looking at some of those aspects as part of my PhD, and the notion of fragmentation that Sean and Andrew have touched on in the chat is quite a big thing. And the question is, how do we go about resolving the fragmentation? Because if the fragmentation persists, the national system of innovation will not thrive. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rendani. Kenneth or Gifty, a quick response to this.
Yeah, I could probably give that a stab. So in a lot of countries, I think that the key word is dialogue, where in order to facilitate coherence, in order to facilitate integration, there has to be a lot of dialogue. We tend to make, there are different sort of temporal dimensions. So a lot of short-term plans, a lot of mid-term plans, a lot of long-term plans. But the key thing is about integration. It's about making sure that the right stakeholders are in the room when you're actually coming up with these plans. Another thing that we need to consider is the sort of like the networks of the actors. So in that sense, one thing which is very interesting is that in some countries, what they do is that they have a lot of actors, they have a lot of agencies, like in Korea, but because a lot of them come from like the same school of thought, or maybe because they come from the same personal networks. So a lot of them are very well aligned. So and because of the national identity in that sense, so they tend to be very clear about their role in the entire scheme of things, and also what are they supposed to do, and what kind of what is expected of them in that sense as well. So I think that's one thing which can actually help with fragmentation. But then again, there are so many other factors that we need to consider as well. In other countries, especially in Southeast Asia, we have a lot of rent seekers, and we have a lot of interesting players in the sphere as well. So because of all of these competing interests, that's where fragmentation also can happen. So it's really down to the way we enforce, we regulate, and also we make sure that we sort of weed that out as well. Gifty, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to it. In my presentation, I said that even though you may want to consider some sector-specific analysis, you shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it has to feed into the national policy. Okay, so then a national level is the unit of analysis, because that's where development actually takes place. So if we are talking about national level, maybe we can talk about different sectors. And in the scenario I presented, the agricultural innovation system, we can have services sector, we can also have manufacturing or industry sector. But at the end of the day, all of them should have indicators that when measured would feed into the bigger national policy. Okay, so if there's that missing interaction or linkage amongst the various sectors that would feed into the national policy, then that is what we have to identify and strengthen. Okay, if they are not communicating, if there's no interaction among these sectors, some of these fragmentations are expected to happen. But once we know that we are doing everything collectively in the nation's interest, then I am sure it will be good to have such interactions at the base. Thank you.
Thank you, Gifty. I see Walid raising his hand. So Walid, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for all your contributions in this fantastic session. I'm doing my PhD at IDS, and I'm looking at the innovation in Egypt. And going back to the comments that were just made, regarding the coherence of the national policies. One observation that I have regarding Egypt as a developing country is that innovation is still perceived and looked at in a very narrow manner. So it is looked at in terms of technology, like access to new technology within particular sectors. So when the government speaks about innovation, they are not really talking about a national innovation policy with an ecosystem, and they have an approach of developing an ecosystem that serves innovation at large, but rather looks at, like, for example, in the Egyptian national development plan, they look at innovation as a component of industrial development, but they don't look at innovation as a policy tool to for the national development and how to drive economic growth forward is looked at in a very narrow manner. So therefore, there is no coherence, because each and every industry looks at how can they get access to a new technology for that particular sector, but there is no national agenda to drive innovation policy at large. So therefore, obviously, there is no coherence and there is no dialogue between all the various actors or players within the innovation landscape. That's my observation regarding Egypt and its relevance to the comments that were made. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Waleed. It makes a very relevant intervention. Thanks a lot for that. I moved to another question, which was posed by Samaha, if she is keen to come online. Come on the mic and speak.
I'm sorry, you said Sama?
Yes, I did.
Sorry.
Would you like to read your question?
Greeting everyone. I'm sorry, I have problems of connection of voice, so I don't hear very well. So I would like to thank you, to thank the organizers of this event. It's very, very important. I would like also to thank Gifty and Kenneth for the presentation. My question was about Africa in general, because I'm from Algeria, and I know that in Africa we give more importance to the state policies in building and supporting national innovation systems. But we can say that also national innovation systems still in a very early stage in Africa, or at least in Algeria, as I know. So what I have noticed in the coca industry, I have seen that there is many interactions between the coca industry and other institutions like financial organizations, economical one, also other competitors as companies, also scientific research centers, and maybe civil association. And I see that there is also interactions between the cocoa industry and the state organizations. So there is, I think, through the Africa, how you say, the Africa contents, we see that there is much weight for the state policies than the other interaction between the industry, for example, and the other institutions like financial one, or the universities and scientific centers especially. So due to the triple helix literature, we have three types. The first type we call statistic configuration, where the government plays the lead role in driving the linkages between industry and academia. And we have second type that we call laissez-faire configuration, where it is characterized by limited state intervention in the economy with the industry and the driving force. And we have the third type that we call it a balanced configuration, where specific to the transition to the knowledge society, in which university and other knowledge institutions act as partners with the industry and the government. And especially in Africa, or maybe in Algeria, we see that maybe the national innovation system take generally the first type, where the policy or the state policies take the leading role in motivating and creating the linkages between industry and other organizations. And in the cocoa industry, I didn't really note which type of these three types that we could refer to. Also, if I could add maybe other comment is about how Algeria, maybe the case of Algeria, look to innovation as the same maybe comment of I join the same comment of Waleed, where we can say that Algeria also look to the national innovation through the number of patents and the number of publication and so on. So we may say that it's important that each country focus on the key sectors, as Kenneth said, in the national innovation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima. I think it's quite a question altogether, and maybe Kenneth Gifty could just throw some light in order to make some his work easy in terms of understanding the case study at large, as well as the theoretical discourses which you have discussed. Over to you.
Okay. Let me take the first shot now, Ken. Thank you very much for all the concerns you have raised concerning the national innovation systems in developing countries. Like in your case in Algeria, Ghana is also in the process of building its national system of innovation. I wouldn't say that there's an existing plan as we speak right now, but the systems are working disjointly, and that is what will give rise to the fear that Rendani raised in his earlier submission. So the cocoa industry is already liaising with some financial organizations whereby they support the farmers into producing quality cocoa beans that would attract the premium price that we talk about all the time. And also, of course, the state organization I mentioned, the Ghana Cocoa Board, that is responsible for all activities relating to cocoa, be it its marketing, its quality control, and the like. Okay, so we have the systems working disjointly. We are now trying to ensure that all their indicators, measurable indicators, are able to feed into the national policy agenda. So for the triple helix model you were talking about, is basically between the institutions, that's the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana, the industry, and then the government provides the policy environment that enhances the activities of these two key players. So once the institutions are able to come up with policies that could be commercialized, the industry would also take it up. And of course, it has to go through a process of learning. But sometimes it's unfortunate to realize that in the process of learning, there's usually a huge gap between what the research institutions are able to come up with and what the industry is also able to take up. Okay, so the learning process too would, I'm sure, propose some interventions that will help bridge this gap so that at the end of the day, because government has already provided the policy environment, and I'm sure if we go into its analysis, we would also see one or two bottlenecks that could also be enhanced. Okay, so it's still, the NSI system of Ghana is still in its preparatory stages, and a lot of research work is going on within the system. We just hope that the bigger picture will be realized at the end of the day. Thank you.
I'd just like to add a few more, perhaps with regards to Sama's question. I've actually done my PhD thesis on mapping linkages between triple helix networks, and that has some value. But I think that the main value is really into mapping how does these networks actually interact dynamically. It's easy to draw pictures of how the relationships actually work, but the real question is really what happens in these relationships, what are the conversations that happen, how does interactive learning happen, and whether or not it actually, whether there is conflict or whether there is agreement. These are the kind of things that actually probably makes more sense. I like Waleed's comment, and I think that there is an interesting thing to note here. A lot of the evolution of how we perceive innovation, I think, has to be credited to the engagement of scholars with governments. And I think that a lot of our senior scholars have played a major role in sort of interacting with politicians and changing the way we look at innovation, which ultimately lead to implementation. And I think that is something that that will take time, but I believe that we as Chris, or we as the GlobalX community actually have are actually in a position to do. I think Professor Andrew asked a question regarding the territorial nature with regards to sectoral agricultural innovation systems. Interestingly, palm oil in Malaysia is very centralized. We have a palm oil board, which actually does most of the research in palm oil, to the point where our Agricultural Research and Development Institute, MARDI, has been told to have hands off of palm oil. It strictly belongs to MPOB. They're not supposed to go near it at all. But interestingly, where in my conversations with them is that they actually have a hard time diffusing such technology even to the local producers. A lot of times, local producers are very technophobic. They are more interested in keeping their costs low and avoiding actually taking on new machinery. And they're actually the ones who are producing the barriers to innovation in that sense. Which is something I'm actually going to be studying in more detail. I'm looking into how actors actually play a role in sort of blocking the innovation ecosystem in that sense. So yeah, do you have anything to add about cacao in Ghana, Gifty, about that territorial nature?
I think we can, if we can proceed with it, because we are left with hardly 12-13 minutes now.
So yes, I think we'll be quick with this. I think we will not go with now question. We'll open more towards discussion. I see a lot of discussions and valid points being raised by Andrew, Professor Gabriel, and Sean has been talking about a lot of interesting things in the chat, and I open this to all of them to volunteer to just give their comments or suggestions or questions. So over to you, Andrew, to begin with.
Well, first, I very much appreciate Kenneth's last comment, and in general, both Gifty and Kenneth's contribution to our knowledge about application. Certainly, when we go to application, then the devil is in the details. And I think one of the key points between Sean and myself is to really look at the quality of interactions and how we understand the quality of interactions. What kind of analytical tools can we use that have shown usefulness, and to look at the complexity of these interactions on different levels, and especially for interest from me between this national level and the territorial level, where there seems to be a significant amount of difficulty, but also between, I would say, the sectoral silos in national innovation policy. For example, between the science, technology, innovation part of the national systems of innovation, and the more the industrial ministries and the people working on technological innovation directly more with the economic actors. So I wonder in the cases that you all are talking about, how does, if there's more talk about connection with the territorial level, but also between these two kinds of actors that I see, at least in Central American innovation systems, which are some of the science, technology, innovation, and the other are the economics ministry, the agricultural ministry, that are doing other kinds of work directly with producers. How is that sorted out in Malaysia or in Ghana or in any other case? And I certainly like to hear from Sean or other people.
Yeah, so thank you, Andrew, for this one. And Sean, would you like to just add some supplementary points to what Andrew said?
Yes, thank you very much. As I mentioned in the chat, I'm enjoying this weekly dip into this topic. This is becoming an institution for me. Maybe just one thing, in some contexts, when you practically go and help stakeholders to try and understand the innovation system, you might not use the word innovation system so often. So maybe that is for the people that are busy doing studies. you might have to use many different words to build a picture of what's going on. So, a question that I typically ask people is, when you get stuck, who do you turn to? Because that gets us to, who do you interact with when you are stuck? Do you try to find answer within your sector? Do you go to suppliers? So the OECD studies and what was it, the UNIDO studies that showed, the UNCTAD studies that showed that companies get a lot of their information from their equipment suppliers and from their clients. So you start mapping by asking people, who do you turn to when you get stuck? Who do you turn to when you can't get something to work better, when you cannot get something right? So maybe that's one perspective as an alternative to start by mapping all the institutions and trying to figure out how valuable they are. The second thing that I just want to comment on is maybe Professor Malerba's comment last week was very valuable again, just to remind us that sectoral, local, national, these are all perspectives on the same system. I think that's very important, but you can also say, what is people's access to this national system? I would call that a bottom-up perspective, because we sometimes draw this national system and it seems so far away from a rural location. But then you start asking people in this location, what is their access to this national system? We don't always have to ask what is their access to the local system, because maybe they would say we don't have a local university or we don't have a local technology infrastructure. But when you turn this thing and say, what is people's access to this national system? You often find that you could have a national program. We have many of those in South Africa, amazing national infrastructure, but it's actually not accessible to people that are far away. They have no budget to reach out to a rural community or to a business that's on the other side of the country. They actually have never thought about how to make their technology demonstrators available or accessible to people that cannot physically visit their facilities. So, I don't think we should always go from national to local. Maybe we could look at what is people's access to this infrastructure that is out there. And then a last comment, just to confirm what Andrew said, when we look at the dynamic, we need to use different tools than typical mapping of institutions. You really have to look at how information flows. And this then links a sector to a community around it that's very diverse, and it's often very social. A lot of knowledge flows between social relationships at cultural events and in school parking lots. It doesn't always flow from technology centers via a license to a firm. So maybe that's just all from my side.
Thank you, Sean. That makes a lot more sense. And I would go to Professor Gabriel. I mean, some of the very interesting points you have raised in the chat, and I would love to listen to his comments on the lecture. Over to you, Professor Gabriel.
Okay, thank you very much. I like to know in the Ghana case if it's possible to understand the existence of linkages and positive feedbacks between the 6 dimensions, because in the graph it seems to be every row going to the center and without blockages, which is the role of blockages in this perspective. And I also wanted to know if any sectors can lead to increase in the position in innovation system. That is, the COCOA have limits, perhaps in terms of the differences with Kenneth have stress in the. So my final question is possible to get Schumpeterian and Keynesian efficiencies coming from COCOA and high-tech sectors as in the Southeast countries?
Thank you, Professor Gabriel. And before Kenneth and Gifty make their interventions, looking at the comments as well as the questions, I would ask some of the eminent scholars who have joined in today to give their comments or suggestion. Maybe we could begin with Carlota. Over to you, if you want to make some comments.
Well, the main thing I would like to say is that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this session very much. I love the connection between theory and reality. And reality is such a wonderful teacher. You know, there are so many things that both Gifty and Kenneth said that enrich enormously our understanding of national systems of innovation and local and sectoral and whichever ones you want. So I would have wanted to ask a question. Do you think that the separation that is usually made between the science and technology institutions, ministries, whatever you want to call them, whatever, and the government, the national government, do you think that works? Or do we have to definitely fight to get technology to be in the center, in the strategy, in the national strategy, as you have actually said? But do you think it works to have a separate Science and Technology Ministry or Science and Technology Council? Just yes or no, because I don't think we have time, but I would like to know, because my answer is no, we've got to separate. I mean, we've got to put them together. We cannot keep it separate. I think it just, we have a history of it not working.
Thank you, Carlota. And I would say if there's any comments or interventions, maybe we are already past. I look at the enthusiasm and the zeal people have been showing right now and still on call. Thanks for that. So any comments, suggestions? Yeah, Walid, maybe a quick one.
Yes, very quick. Back to Carlota. I think her point is right, spot on. Looking at the case of Egypt, for example, the Ministry of Science and Technology is completely in disconnect with all the various efforts that are taking place in various sectors that are trying to develop the sector and engage into putting an innovation strategy for economic growth and development. So there is a complete disconnect between the Ministry of Science and Technology and the various departments that there is, and whatever innovation activities that are happening in various sectors of the economy. So it is there, but it's like more of a trophy than than actually efficient and active and connected to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Walid. That makes a valid point altogether, and maybe all the researchers would keep into account all these emerge at the national. But before we close the session, I give it to Kenneth and Gifty to make their quick interventions. Hello.
Just to perhaps I should just answer Carlota's question. I think for me it's a yes and a no. I think that it's a little bit too complex a question to actually answer in such a short way. I have seen it work. I've seen it not work, and it really is a question of who's driving the car. And I think that there are good bureaucrats out there, no matter how, regardless of how weird that sounds. But then I would say that it's really a question of what are the dynamics, what's happening on the ground, whether they have a good connection with what's going on. We can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater in that sense. Yeah.
Okay,
what do you, Gifty?
Yeah, to attempt to answer Prof. Gabriel's question, maybe the charts, there were too many arrows going back and forth, so it made it difficult for you to understand the direction of interaction among the actors. But I would say that the firm is the core of this whole analysis, and it's possible that they get feedback from each of the actors they interact with. But these actors we are talking about also in turn interact with other actors. So it's not like it's just a linear relationship between the firm and the other actors. The interactions goes around, because if you take COCOBOD as an example, it interacts with the marketing company, which is a subsidiary of COCOBOD. It also interacts with other financial institutions who also support farmers in their production. And the government also has an overarching supervision over the activities of all these people. So I'm sure that's why you had the arrows going back and forth. The linkages exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gifty, for your intervention. I think we had a wonderful session. Okay. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Nimita, if we are at the end of the session, I would want to extend sincere gratitude to Rajesh and the other teams for making it possible for us to come on this August platform and share our ideas on a very intriguing concept of national innovation systems. Rajesh birthed this idea right from Mombasa experience in 2014, 2015, right after the academy. He asked all of us to provide one reference each of anything innovation systems that could enhance our research. So I wasn't surprised that at the end of the day, he invited all of us to come together and offer this 101 Innovation Systems Lecture Series 101. So I would like to thank him so much, and everybody who has supported this dream in carrying the message out to early career researchers to also with their interest in this whole system. We are very grateful for the hard work.
Thank you. Thank you, Gifty. It means a lot for the entire team, and you are a part of it, of course. And I could hear Professor Muchie speaking, so maybe he wants to have something to add. Over to you, Professor Muchie.
Mammo, you can speak. Professor Mammo. Mammo, you can speak.
I think I can see Professor Muchie, but...
Yeah. Professor Mammo, please unmute and speak.
I'm mute. Yes, I'm unmuted now. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
No, let me just say, let me just add on this application of the National System of Innovation. I want to ask two more critical challenges, and one of them is the following. Because of now the current digital technology, we are having the rural areas and the urban areas, all right, our agriculture and industry, manufacture, services are interconnecting. There is a challenge to us. Because of this, how do we also now rethink the system of innovation to make sure that rural areas don't have to be urban and industrial? They can still be modern. You know, they can still be advanced with high tech. Now, if you go to Kenya, they use more mobile technology than America. I'm told, at least I have read data like this. What I'm just saying to you, this is a very interesting challenge. Another very important one is there is the International Commission on Financing Global Education opportunity. And the United Nations in 2016 said 2 billion or half of all current jobs are projected to disappear by 230 due to automation. To continue to progress at the current pace by 2030, half of all the youth, over 800 million young people, will not have basic secondary education level skills needed to keep up in a new economy. It's clear that global
Mammo, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. The new globalization. Can I shout? The new globalization, the new technology, advancing technology, all right, is the new robotics. All this is destroying jobs and affecting the young population. So how do we, what I like you to do is, I'm just saying that we are now in a time when we don't need to be linearly growing, but co-evolutionary growing. In other words, we rural areas can also be modern and almost high level. They can have high quality. They can have. Let me just tell you what they can have. They can have all the education, the transport, the housing can be upgraded and they can become, the communities become modern. So without necessarily becoming urban and industrial. So what does it mean to the innovation system that we have been learning from? In how does this new technology change it, and what kind of challenges we're facing? How do we address the problem, and how do we also make sure that we get opportunity to utilize this technology to transform and reform, re-innovate the innovation system? That's the kind of thing. On the application side, from linearity, we should go to this co-evolutionarity and the unified approach, the holistic approach. That approach is quite interesting because the technologies are actually challenging us to do it. That's just my last point and my last comment. And as Rajesh said, I must be critical. I have been too critical. Sorry for those who have been working on the innovation system. That Mammo is, I think he needs to write a big book, and then hopefully you should all recommend me to get a Nobel Prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Mammo.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I really appreciate all of you. There was a wonderful lecture, very practical, very good. I appreciate Dr. Kenneth, Dr. Gifty, very good. And all of you, I think all of you, the comments, I read all the chat comments, fantastic comments. All of you are engaged, and all of
Yeah. Nimita, your slides are not visible.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the slide
Is it
sharing
visible now?
It is not visible. If it is not working, you can simply speak, no problem. You can simply read it out, no problem.
Okay, I'll do that. Maybe there is some internet glitch
Thank
right
you so
now.
much. Also, I appreciate you. I didn't mention your name, and all of you, because you have been doing very good work, and of course Rajesh and his family are the best. So please do all the work that you are doing. Thank you so much, and enjoy and be safe and healthy in this not easy time. All of you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mammo. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. But as a convention, my internet is a little shaky, and I'm so sorry I can't show the slides, but I would just like to update and give. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
So thank you, Mammo. Thank you, Kenneth, Gifty, for making this wonderful lecture. Very lively, very interactive and insightful. Thanks to all of you for being here, patiently contributing to this wonderful lecture. And I'm so sorry, my internet is a little shaky, so I've kept my video off and I'm not able to share the slides, but there are few quick announcements and updates, one being on the forthcoming lecture, that would be lecture 9, which would be on NIS as an economic development tool by Dr. Kehinde and Dr. Elvis. The chair would be Professor Manuel Godino, and the moderator would be Dr. Getachew. So we look forward. It would be on Wednesday, 3rd March, same time, same place, if I have to put it. Yeah. So we'll join at the same Zoom link. And of course, please keep pouring your questions, irrespective of whether we are able to take it in the lecture or not. We have 2 wonderful panel discussions lined up on 1st April and 7th April. 1st April, we will be talking about development and global south. And on 7th, we'll be talking more about the theoretical and foundational aspects of it. Some of the eminent scholars and practitioners will be answering 20 selected questions. Let's not put a number, but then yes, 20 selected questions to that. And please, please, please pour in the questions in the chat box, or also write to us on our email ID, which is chris.innovationstudies@gmail.com. Please put question in the subject line so that we are able to filter those emails and keep your questions handy during the panel discussions. We have, in addition, a very important announcement that is about the upcoming GlobalX conference in Costa Rica, which is from 3rd to 5th of November 2021. I hope to see all of you physically over there. Please, please, visit the website globalx.org to kind of know all the important dates for submission of paper, for acceptance notification. We would love to have all your contributions. And this is on behalf of the GlobalX Secretariat. We put forward this call for paper. And yeah, so this is it in terms of updates. We look forward to your support and cooperation in the future events. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great day, great evening, and good night for some of you. So take care, stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.